Ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, welcome to today's 18th episode of the Live Painting Channel. My name is Warren Stokes and I am your host today. By the way, we broadcast this every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. Glad you could join us today. We've got a completely new topic, a new subject, and it's going to be stretching my imagination and perhaps my talents quite a bit. That's what I've been doing lately. Today, I'm going to be painting a study of The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. So let me explain a little bit about the concept here and where we're at. Basically, I've just started to sketch out the composition. And I'm going to use my new zoom tool here to zoom into this a little bit while we go through some of the background. Let's see if I can get that working. Yeah, there we go. All right, good enough for now. So I'm going to explain the painting a little bit, and I'm going to start with the fact that this is probably one of the best known paintings in all of the world. I have a little book here on Leonardo da Vinci. Actually, it's a pretty big book, and I captured this image that I'm going to be doing a study on from this book. I believe, according to the book, it's the real thing. There's been a lot of reproductions of this particular piece of work in history, and so there you have the original. I also have created a kind of a reference piece here, which I'm going to show you as we go through here. And I have this little mechanism now that I put my reference material. So I created a little aluminum bar, and I tape my reference images sometimes on that, and then I clamp them to the back of my easel, as you'll see, and it becomes my point of reference. Sometimes I don't need it, sometimes I do. Today I am sure I will. Okay, bear with me while I get this all positioned here. There we go. Alright. Get that a little bit lower. I've got all kinds of little devices that I've created and used for the art studio here. That's one of them. And just to show you what I just did here, I just have that reference piece from the book hanging to the left of my canvas. In any event, where we're at right now is the very beginning of this painting. What I've done is I've just got sketched in very lightly the composition. And it's interesting, particularly with my kind of predilection towards geometry and symmetry and dynamic symmetry in painting, this one is really fascinating. And I'm going to explain a few points of the geometry and the composition before we actually start painting here. First of all, the painting format is in the 2.236 ratio, which is one of the dynamic symmetry ratios. How that's constructed is that there's a square in the middle of the painting, and it's flanked by two golden rectangles on either side. More on that in a future topic, future session if you wish. And you know, it's kind of hard to know with some of these really old pieces of art exactly what the dimensions were. They've been painted over and repainted and restored so many times, but what I found is that the Last Supper seems to be constructed on this particular ratio of 2.236. And so I created a canvas to that dimension. It's one of my new favorites. You probably remember seeing one of my recent desert paintings. I'll show it to you. Based on the same canvas size. Here. And it just became a very pleasing size to me. Or I should say ratio. And what I attempt to do is kind of capitalize on the intrinsic proportions of my canvas size to do a number of things, but to create fundamental harmony and beauty in the composition, but also to draw your eyes to certain things. So let me show you something really cool that I found out by studying this painting. If you look at the main diagonal of this painting here, this canvas, and you look at the lines coming in on the perspective, they are centered at and point at the figure of Jesus right in the very middle of this. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, there's more. You know, and the thing about this particular painting and this particular artist, Leonardo da Vinci, nothing is random. Every little tiny piece of the painting, every piece of the composition, and as I will further discover, I think every color has meaning. It's not placed randomly. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So I sketched this out. It's trying to kind of stay true to the original work here. Let me zoom back out now. We'll get started on the painting. This is going to be so much fun. We'll leave it right there for now. I've recently been challenging myself to do new topics and new kind of subject matter. If you know the live painting channel or have been following it much at all, you know I really love outdoors and landscapes, and I like desert and mountains and lakes and the ocean and all those wonderful things that just make me feel good when I paint. And I'm branching off into some new challenging territories here. This one is a little bit contrary to my, not contrary, but kind of in contrast to my love for the French Impressionists, who you may recall from a couple of my recent paintings, did not focus on subject matter. They focused on the study of light. In fact, they specifically avoided topics like religion and history. Well, there's absolutely no question this particular work by Leonardo da Vinci is definitely both historical in nature and religious in nature. But what the heck, you know? Wanted to explore new horizons and just see what we could do with this. So I basically just sketched out the composition here, got some basic shapes of the 12 apostles and Jesus and the room they're in, which is really dramatic. And now we're gonna start this painting. I gotta apologize. I have to grab a little bit more water. I know I'm supposed to have it all done in advance, but hang on just a second. Thanks for bearing with me while I get my 2 extra quarts of water. I paint in acrylics on most of these shows because it's quick to work with and it dries quickly and lends itself to this live format. Now I've been thinking about the color palette here quite a bit, and I've come to believe that I think my best choice here is going to be sticking with some basics, and I'm going to just start with a really basic burnt umber, which I buy in the big tubes now. I love it so much. I'm also going to be using some raw sienna. See what I mean by basics? That's a brand, I guess. And yellow ochre. It turns out that these are a lot of my favorite pigments in general, and I think they're going to lend themselves well to this painting, but we'll also see some nuances of primary colors, particularly blue and red, and of course the requisite gray throughout my works here. Boy, we better just get started. This is going to be fun. First thing we're going to do is start mixing our palette, and I'm going to start with some of the dark tones to establish the dark and light, which is one of the fundamental concepts in a work of art, and especially painting. So today I have 2 or 3 of these smaller palettes, and I'm just going to go ahead and start loading some pigment on there. Of course, we're going to put our burnt umber, and starting to buy these in giganto tubes of titanium white. That's a big tube, but I use so much of it And I think you'll find as you start painting, or if you've been painting for a while, that white is definitely the most used pigment of any of them. Possibly because it kind of ties a lot of the elements together, perhaps. But in this case, usually I will start pretty wild and loose, kind of just to get the feel for the painting, and I'll start slapping, pigment on the canvas. But I have a different approach today. I'm going to be a little more methodical, a little more careful, partially due to the fact that it's got a lot of architectural elements to it. So I'm going to take a relatively small rectangle brush, and I'm just going to start mixing my palette with that real simple burnt umber and white, and I'm going to create about 3 levels of intensity to that. These little plastic palettes are good for that. You can kind of create little wells of different kind of intensity of the pigment, if you will. So I'm going to create kind of a light, middle, dark. I might as well throw in my gray right now while I'm thinking of it. Definitely going to get some gray going on here. And also it's interesting with these old paintings is, it's kind of hard to know what the original pigments were, what the original colors were, because they've been restored and worked on so many times. So that kind of leaves it up to artistic license, doesn't it? Kind of interpret and do our artist things as we go. And we're going to start with that dark part of the well. And in this particular painting, there's definitely some dark kind of rectilinear shapes. The rectangles that are, you can see here, the rectangles that are essentially windows, perhaps into another room, but they're really dark. And I'm going to just have to get right into it here. Let's just start with this one, why not? So I'm going to, as I said, today's work's going to be a little slower and more careful and methodical. And it's not one of those paintings we'll finish in an hour or two probably, but you never know. But I'm going to start putting in some dark shapes here. Keep my brush plenty hydrofluided up there. Those little lines, those sharp lines were like down this window frame. You got to be pretty crisp to get at least to get the effect that I'm looking for today, which is that architectural background look here. Pretty simple, but important in my concept of today's painting is to get these lines pretty nicely painted on the canvas. In nature you don't see a lot of pure straight lines and angles, which is why this is a bit of a departure for me in terms of my, I guess you'd call it my style, my genre that I've been kind of developing in my art. This is the 18th episode, by the way, of the live painting channel, episode 18. Produced, I think it's 14 paintings now from the beginning of the year. A lot of fun. Really enjoy the community that has discovered our mutual pursuit here. And by the way, as I always encourage people to do, whenever you're tuning into the live painting channel, please grab your paints or whatever art medium you use or are interested in, and just paint along. It's just kind of a hangout zone too, All right, and as I have stated very clearly in my legal warnings at the beginning of the program, there's some dangers here. One of the possible dangers is you could actually learn something, although that's not really what I'm here to do. I'm not teaching you so much as creating a more of an experiential program here. Let's continue with this dark. Hey, that turned out pretty good. I haven't run this painting yet, have I? Not yet. Give me a chance. Yeah, but like I was saying, I've been branching out. Did a painting, one of my one of my first paintings of the human figure, and it was of my granddaughter Marigold. I don't know, Marigold, if you're on the program today, hi. Happy Sunday. And we called that one Catching Sunlight. Really fun work. Struggled a bit with it, but at the end of the day, one of the little thoughts that I've had here about the process of art and the process of painting is don't be committed to the outcome, but be committed to the process. And as I've been asked before, is art about creating a perfect image of whatever it is? No, not in my opinion. Not in my opinion at all. It's about the process of creativity, and what it does for me is it helps me more thoroughly kind of get alive, be more alive, and it helps me experience my realities, my visual and tactile and other realities, tactile realities, just more thoroughly. So, not necessarily about being perfect. It's not we're creating a photograph. Well, clearly not here. I didn't photograph the 12 apostles with Jesus, I don't think. Not in my photo reel. Today I'm working from one of the most well-known pieces of art, I think, in the whole wide world, The Last Supper. Lots of religious connotations and historical connotations. But I'm also doing this as a study to try to better understand some of the old masters and how they created art, it's kind of forensic art. How did they get this painting? How did they create it? And I've discovered already, as I was sharing, a lot of geometry, very rich in geometry. And I don't think there's anything random in this painting. So I'm going to just, as I go, I'll point out what I mean by that. So for example here, the lines of the perspective here, and it's 1 point perspective, they all are pointing, not coincidentally, at the center point of the rectangle and right at the head of Jesus. Pretty cool, I think. Anyway, so as I do this, I'm having a good time just thinking about that. And so now we've got the big one up here, the big boy. Perspective is a very interesting concept and understanding of visual interpretation, and it has to do with the way the eye perceives depth in the world. And it turns out there are actually what we would call laws of perspective and how they work. And somehow it all seems to make sense, but it has to do, one central theme of the laws of perspective is it has to do with what's called the vanishing point. The vanishing point. See if anyone in the audience can then say, okay, what's the vanishing point in this painting so far? From what I've told you. Little question, little mini quiz for anybody in the audience who can now interpret what I've been sharing with what is the vanishing point. If no one guesses it, I may just share, or maybe we'll just wait for a while. Painting the edges of my painting is something I do now. My daughter Amber taught me that, believe it or not. She's a pretty good artist, real good artist. I hope someday maybe Amber would come on the show and paint. She's a great artist. And she taught me about the painting of the edges of a canvas, which kind of precludes the need to put it in a frame. Anyway, framing my canvases is a bit of a pain because I rarely use a stock canvas proportion, canvas dimension. The last one I did, it was probably about 6 or 8 weeks ago. I started with a stock canvas. I shared this with the audience. About halfway through the painting, I just said, forget it. I tore the painting apart, took the canvas off, redid it. I had it painted, largely painted, and I just resized the canvas in process. It was pretty crazy. But it worked, and I started to feel better about it because it was just bothering me using that stock canvas, and I just knew that my vision was to have a different proportion. So all I'm doing right now is placing some dark areas in the painting, and they happen to be, in this case, these very architectural parts of the painting, framing one of the walls, which are, I think, kind of like windows in effect, but that other room is darkened. So that's how I interpret it. Okay. Notice how already the eye is starting to recede and point at, in this case, that central theme of the painting. Very cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over here on the flip side. Make sure I'm doing it the way I want. Here we have it. Carefully painting today. So different than what I normally do. Normally I am slapping the paint on at this point in a painting. And that does have a nice effect a lot of times. It just, to get a loose painterly effect. Now that line got a little bit off, but hey, close enough for religious matter, I think. Well, you know, religion is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, a lot of people are very religious. I'm not religious, but I am spiritual, so I think there's a difference there. I'm not so much into the dogma, the strict rules and whatever of religion, but I do believe that you can be very spiritual and not have to be religious. To me, it just means the appreciation of life, doing good. We all know that that's what it's all about, I think. We know the difference between good and evil and all that good stuff, and try to practice it, help others. It's actually one of the things I'm doing with this live painting channel is I'm really just sharing my experiences, my little bit of skill maybe, but experiences mostly, and thoughts on art with the world, in the hopes that maybe somebody will appreciate some of it here and there, but mainly to become inspired themselves, to become inspired yourselves to create art. I like painting. It's not my only form of art. In fact, painting and drawing, right, it's an interesting thing, is that you can paint without drawing and you can draw without painting. I just thought of that. I tend to use drawing to help me form the concepts and the compositions of my paintings, but it's not one or the other. You can be an accomplished artist just drawing. I've done quite a bit in colored pencil. That's a neat medium. Kind of hard to do in a live painting show. Those drawings tend to take quite a while. Using colored pencils or just pencil. But man, I've seen some nice artwork just done with pencils and colored pencils. Yeah. Okay, now that's pretty bold, don't you think? Woo-hoo. If anybody out in the audience today has a suggestion, comment, feel free to just put it in the chat box. Always appreciate that. So that line wasn't the straightest line in the world, but again, I'm not trying to be perfect. There is a saying credited to Vince Lombardi, who is the very famous coach of the Green Bay Packers. I don't know if you're on Wisconsin today. Is Wisconsin on the program today? Let's see. Well, maybe she'll hear this in the video, but Vince Lombardi once said, "Perfection is an impossible goal. Perfection is an impossible goal, but it's the striving for perfection that creates excellence." Think about it. So you can strive for perfection. Doubt you'll ever really get there because it's an impossible goal. Well, and the other thing is you can certainly have fun along the way, can't we? Alright. That's really one of the main goals that I think, that I have anyway with art, is to have fun. Since you really can't really make a mistake, at least a mistake that's irrevocable, typically. Mistakes often, in fact, sometimes mistakes turn into cool things, like I've dropped a little blob of paint on the painting and gives me an idea of, hey, maybe something should go there, then to go with it. With acrylics, though, you can actually kind of put it in reverse and paint over stuff. I've done that on some paintings, and perhaps to the extreme. And another little lesson for me has been knowing when to stop and call it good. Finito. But everybody has their own way of doing it. So I'm just kind of continuing with this dark matter. Which are these panels or windows, if you will. And I kind of like it because it becomes the geometric framework, really, for this whole composition. At least a big part of it. Single point perspective. Anyone care to guess where the vanishing point is in this painting? All right. I was talking a little bit about the laws of perspective and how there are one or more vanishing points, depending on whether you're doing single point, 2-point, or 3-point perspective even. I'm not sure if there's a 4-point, but I know there's 3-point perspective. But the vanishing point is where all the lines lead to. In this case, right here, right in the middle. That's the vanishing point. I'm just looking and thinking here a bit, in case you're wondering. Yeah, I think I haven't messed it up yet. Let's keep going. Keep her going. I'm doing it without any guidelines here. Just creating this one. No training wheels. Live painting. Kind of like too how these dark panels sort of start framing some of the figures in the painting, huh? As you'll see that more as we get into it. So as I have been painting quite a lot lately, I found it interesting to occasionally take a kind of an interim progress photograph. So I'm going to actually do that right now. Part of the reason is it helps me kind of study the progression of a painting. I certainly share it with our audiences, but it also helps me show people how a painting can be constructed, and so, kind of techniques, and perhaps it'll be in the book. Outtakes from the live painting channel. Actually, maybe I gotta think about what the name of that book's gonna be. How to paint. Hey, if you have any ideas for a name of a book based on the live painting channel, you just let me know. Be glad to think about it. All right, take a look at this. Yeah, painting is definitely a progression. Different stages of the painting. So, speaking of that, stages of a painting or a piece of art. One, what's the very first thing that you do in a painting? You have an idea, a source of inspiration. I'm not exactly sure how this popped into my mind, but I was thinking of doing something different, and I thought, well, I've never done a religious or a historical painting before, so why not study one of the masters? Anyway, so the first thing, have an idea or a source of inspiration. The second thing is to come up with a composition. Or is it going to be round, square, rectangular? If it's a rectangle, what are the dimensions that kind of maybe suit your source of inspiration or your idea? And then you start defining, if it's your style to define with geometry or how the painting works geometrically, that's great. If not, then that's fine. But the next phase of a painting is establishing light and dark areas. Think of it, the world, if you think of the world as black and white, it's a good way to think of it, is that you can look at the world and your image and your composition in black and white, and you'll definitely see light and dark because you're not distracted by the color, right? So that's an ideal concept here. Now, I also want to emphasize that it's important to establish the source of light. It could be more than one, but at least one source, primary source of light. And I'll tell you kind of what I'm seeing in this painting. I didn't establish it, Leonardo da Vinci did. But this side, as you'll see, the negative areas or the positive areas produced by this wall and these dark panels is going to be darker than this side. So the light is coming from left to right. And you'll also start seeing that as I get into the figures and some of the detail here. And then what that means too is that there's kind of a, I don't know, law, guideline of light or something that tends to say when a light is shining, say from the left, the objects that have some edge up against it tend to be a little darker in that edge facing the source of light. I don't know if that makes sense to y'all. But what I'm going to do right now is go to another hue, if you will, of light and dark, and I'm going to start showing you that. I'm just kind of playing around with that. Gosh, I used up all my raw sienna. Probably have more of that somewhere. Let's see here. Oh, yep. Never be without a backup tube of your favorite pigments, right? Especially if you're doing live paintings like this online. So I'm going to start lightening it and changing the hue a little bit. The tone is light and dark. The hue is the color. I'm going to add a little bit of this raw sienna to my mix over here. But keeping the burnt umber is kind of the baseline here. And I'm going to just boldly go where I have not gone before and start painting this little corner up here of the end of the room here. And what I mean is by the gradation of these intersection of kind of elements here is that the points that are closer to the source of light end up being a little bit darker. You can see that to be true on spheres, polygons of any sort of freeform shapes, and then as you go away from that intersection from the source of light, it starts to become lighter. And that's what we're going to do over here. Yeah. Ooh, I kind of like that. I mean, after all, nobody knows really the exact color of what that room was, right? So I am creating a nice little bit of color over here. In fact, leaving it with a little bit of that semi-unrestored look or something. Ooh, cool. In fact, I want the audience to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in on that little piece because it's kind of cool. Over here with the zoom. Not that way. There we go. Zoom right in. There we go. So this is the area that I'm working on right now. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I'm going to sharpen that dark part of the corner up even more. It's almost pure Payne's gray up in there. And I think I shared with everyone, this painting is going to be more methodical, a little slower, a little more complicated, if you will. So bear with me and enjoy the ride. Maybe it's a nice pace for you. Change pace for me too. Alright. Well, members of the audience, family, friends, or people that might have just randomly stumbled on the live painting channel. Welcome. You have joined the 18th episode of Live Painting Channel. By the way, I will also be posting the video of this on my YouTube channel. Easy to find my stuff. I'm Warren Stokes. You can just go in and search for the Live Painting Channel or Warren Stokes on YouTube or Twitch. Twitch is my platform for the broadcasting, but I haven't yet got enough followers. Oh, what I need are some more apostles. Yeah, they call it on Twitch. They call them followers. It's kind of like anything. If you follow an artist or someone, then you get little alerts and stuff. But it would enhance the whole program, because I could then, if I get enough followers, I think it's like 50, then on Twitch, then you can also see my videos posted on Twitch right now. They're on YouTube, and I also put them on Facebook. And at the end of today's program, I will post my contact information in case anyone wants to collaborate, reach out, have any questions, any way I could help. Happy to do so. All right, now there's an interesting little element here that I noticed as I was thinking about and getting ready to paint this subject matter today, the Last Supper. And there is a piece of architectural adornment, so to speak, in the window behind Jesus here, and there's a circular arc. And guess what I just discovered? That that arc, which is part of the architectural adornment, is literally part of a perfect circle centered by, you guessed it, the man himself. Right there, another little discovery I made. Didn't read this in a book, just discovered it. Starting to prepare for this painting. Okay, now. Well, I am having a little fun with just pigment, loose pigmentation in some of these areas, that's for sure. Yeah. There's that little arc. Fun, fun, fun. Okay. This is all part of the same plane. If you think in art of terms of planes, and that's not airplanes. If anyone out there doesn't get that, it's P-L-A-N-E. They're flat surfaces, typically intersecting with other surfaces. And so this is one of my planes. So this is a plane, it's a flat surface. This is a plane, the wall this way. This is a plane. That's a plane. And the importance of planes has a couple of things. One is that it's governed by these kind of laws of light, as I was describing earlier. And it also helps you kind of organize your painting into planes. Not all paintings have planes, but most of them do. Many of them do anyway. So again, what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of establishing the left edge of this plane where it intersects with the kind of the source of light is darker, and then the right edge of this plane is lighter. And similarly, you'll see what happens here is that the next intersection of planes, which will be right over here, is going to start just a shade darker than that plane. Even though it's probably the same color. Follow me on that? I hope so. Right in this little section, the intersection, it's going to be a little darker. This will be interesting. I'm sure this is at least a 2-part episode. I am enjoying it so far. So now we're going to just pick up some of the lighter as we move out here. Some of this I can be a little bit painterly, like this area, right, where I'm not having to tightly control every little wiggle of the brush because it's kind of just directionally painting here. And as I get up into here more and more, now I think what I'm going to start seeing up in here, I think I'm going to start seeing a little bit of that yellow ochre sneak into this area. So that's about what we're looking for there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to continue though with some of this plain down here. And that in the center of this kind of architectural piece, darker. Kind of an adornment, I guess you'd call it. Alright. Just remember, perfection is an impossible goal, but if we strive for perfection, we can possibly achieve excellence, or even a little more moderate goal, something just called good or fun. I am having fun today, let me tell you what. Okay. So it's amazing. Today's session, I think, will pretty much be for establishing the lights and darks. We got our composition. We figured out where the light was coming from. Start working on lights and darks. This is fun right here. We just trying to move the brush fairly quickly. Yeah, got a little wavy, but it's okay. I might come back and straighten out some of that stuff. I don't know yet. But anyway, these are coming down like so. I guess it depends on how perfect I want to make it, doesn't it? My straight lines, or are they just sort of straight lines? Straight-ish. But for right now, I just want to basically get that geometry of this whole painting kind of dialed in, and the composition and the light and dark. That's the goal today. Not a lot of detail. Let's see here. I had zoomed out a bit, so let's. Here we go. That's what we're talking about there, folks. Oh, there it is, the whole thing. So I'm going to zoom back out a bit and take a look at it. Okay, that's a good zoom angle. All right. I'm still working on establishing the right light and dark, according to my mind, which means this is going to be darker than I have got it here. I definitely have the same hue and tint on this plane and down the background here. Interesting little angles, and everything is so well thought out. Well, no surprise, it's Leonardo. One of the people, some people would say the best artist of all time. Most prolific and best artists of all time. in terms of works and how well received from his community and his society and all the powers that be, or that were in power then. This is like 1,000 years ago or something. I will have to start reaching into my smaller brush sizes here pretty soon. Not so fast. Anybody seeing it? Yeah. Yeah, it's starting to come more out, huh? Yep. Pretty fun. I'm just still blending and mixing and shaping, forming. Trying to get the light and the dark to make sense. It's to make sense in your eye, to your mind's eye. So I'm going to move on to a little bit different area here, for which I will need another brush. Let's see. Brush. What brush should I use? Oh, I got it right here. Okay, I'm going to use a little round brush. A nice little round brush. And I'm going to start working on these lines, for which I will need a little bit more burnt umber. And a little bit more Payne's Gray, because that's what the palette calls for. Simple palette so far, huh? In review, I've got burnt umber, raw sienna, Payne's Gray, and white. And that's going to be my dark shades here, the dark side. Alright, so let's do a little bit of that. So these I'm just going to go freehand, or let's see, semi-freehand. I got an idea. I'll use one of my old techniques to kind of steady my hand there. Ooh, see how I just put that brush as a little kind of a brace. So I don't get too squiggly. Little technique for you there. Alright. Ooh, I like those lines. Looking pretty cool. In this case. We're getting close, folks. We're getting there. Making some seriously good progress here. Oops. That was a oops. Alright, we'll fix it later. Okay, I'll just do this one. Yep. Cool. Loving it. Alright. quite done with this phase. I just want to keep working on some of these areas that are not painted yet. And if you just joined us, you're watching the 18th episode of the Live Painting channel, working on study of The Last Supper. Ooh, new subject matter, new material for me. Don't do a lot of these genres, but I'm having fun so far. And we just about got the architectural basis figured out here, don't we? Yeah. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. You know, we're a little ways from completing it. I'm just stepping back and studying it a little bit to see where I want to end up today. It's interesting how this is already kind of carved out the basis for the figures here. I'm going to put in just a hint of this dark area over here. So I suspect with this painting that it's been modified quite a bit since the original, and I've seen different versions of it. Some of it, the table goes down below and you can actually see their feet and stuff like that below the table. I'm not so bought in that was the original composition, not necessarily. No, partially because when I reconstructed this, the geometry worked out so perfectly with this 2.236 ratio. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but tell you what, it all seems to make sense when I reconstructed this kind of forensically. Like an art scholar would, discovering a new fresco, measuring it. I just did a bunch of measurements and stuff and laid rulers and stuff down. By the way, an interesting little tidbit I picked up somewhere was, you know, if you're measuring for dimensions, it's better to use a ruler that has the centimeter scale as well as the inch scale. Just forget about the inches; they're so hard to deal with from a ratio standpoint. Okay, like what's 0.618 times 5 3/4? Well, that's a goofy number. You know, fractions aren't. That's why the whole world, except for the United States, went to the metric system. By the way, much easier, base 10 type stuff. Anyway, use a ruler that has the centimeter, the metric scale on it, and you'll find it's easier to do your ratios. All right, more on that in my book. I have to write a pretty deep section on that in my book. Okay, well, so we got a little bit of mid-tone established there, as well as probably right in here, because you know we gotta start getting composition done at some point. There's definitely some kind of cool little landscape in the back of these windows. I have to work on that real carefully, but right now, just establishing the basics for the composition. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, this is going to conclude today's episode of the Live Painting channel. This is going to be continued next Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific time. And I want to thank everybody who's ever, joined into one of these or many of these sessions and the growing community around it. My name is Warren Stokes, your host. Look forward to seeing you again. I'm going to post some contact information for you here, so if you feel like reaching out, you're welcome to. You'll also find this work Live Painting channel on Facebook. You'll see it. You can Google it on YouTube and Twitch. All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.